This is practical application of the K2 AZ Computer Science Standards. My name is Sean Abley. I'm an ed tech in the Gilbert Public Schools. Arizona adopted the computer science standards in 2018. Looks like some of you are familiar with them, some of you not very familiar with them. Hopefully you'll have a better understanding of them by the time this is done. When the standards were adopted in 2018, first of all, I'm a computer science major. I've been teaching computers since 2002. And on top of that, I really love standards. So when they came out with the computer science standards, I was really excited to just dive into them. So I created some documents to help teachers and other tech coaches help their teachers with application of the computer science standards. Standards in K5 are geared towards introducing and developing an understanding of computer science concepts, comparing computer science to subjects students are already familiar with, and helping develop their knowledge of computer science. Again, my name is Sean Abley. I'm with the Gilbert Public Schools. I'm a technology coach. I've taught computers since 2002 to everyone from kindergarten through 12th grade, and as a tech coach to the adults in the buildings now. Sometimes I get the distinct pleasure of going back in the classrooms and teaching computer science to students, which I absolutely love, which is where I get a lot of the things that I've used in these documents. My degree is in computer science, and I am a standards geek. So when the state of Arizona adopted the CS standards, I really couldn't wait to dive into them. So this is kind of a breakdown of where it looks like you're the standards. If you went to the poll, some of them, I've looked at them and feel pretty confident, looked at them and have some ideas and have heard about them, but haven't really read through them. And typically that's what I see in the schools that I support, as well as people that I talk to. So hopefully this will give you some information that you can take back to your classrooms and be able to use right away. So my objectives with this are to provide an overview of the computer science standards, identify ways that you're already teaching them, and then provide some extension activities and ideas to go along with the standards. I'll be sharing this slideshow with you tomorrow. Once I have everyone's email addresses, then I'll send that out. So you don't have to worry about taking a whole lot of notes right from the slides. I'll be more than happy to share those, and it has links to all the materials that I talk about. So when I created these documents, I'm going to use the first grade ones just because it's between kinder and second. So I'm going to open up one of them and show you what this is all based on. A lot of the classes in our district have a designated computer time, so I wanted to be able to provide some things to the teachers to be able to utilize. So what I did was I took the computer science standards and broke them down by standard. So the first box in each standard is verbatim right from the Department of Ed website that talks about the standards. So for example, with the first one, with teacher guidance, select and operate appropriate devices and software to perform a task. And it kind of gives a little bit of a description of what they mean by that. So for each standard, what I did and identified ways that you're already doing that, and then some extension ideas. So really, when teachers look through these documents, they're able to identify that they're really already teaching all of the computer science concepts in their courses right now. So for the most part, teachers are meeting these standards already. Some of it might take a little bit of purposefulness. So to start identifying things for students and talking to them a little bit more and using the vocabulary that they may not be using. But in going through the document, then you can find some ways that you might be able to adjust some verbiage just to be able to meet the standards. I found that teachers with that computer time, they don't necessarily know what to do during the time. So they have students going to educational games like math games and even typing, which is great, but to do that for an entire year is a bit much. So I really wanted to make these documents so teachers had something to offer their kids outside of, maybe some things they hadn't already thought of. The computer science standards are broken down into 5 essential concepts: computer systems, networking in the internet, data analysis, algorithms and programming, and the impact of computing. The first one, computer systems, covers devices, hardware and software, and troubleshooting. And this comes directly from, again, the first grade standards, just because it falls between K and 2, but they're all very similar to each other. So with devices, the standard is, with teacher guidance, select and operate appropriate devices and software to perform a task. With hardware and software, use appropriate terminology in identifying and describing the function of common physical components of a computing systems. And with troubleshooting, with teacher guidance, begin to use basic troubleshooting strategies. And these are the ways that teachers are already doing it. As far as devices, if you're using correct terminology when speaking about devices, so for example, when you're working with students, say we're going to open a Google Doc because we use Google Docs to create documents. We're going to open KidPix because it's a program used for drawing. Or if you want them to go to the internet, click on Google Chrome. Chrome is a browser we use to access the internet. So starting to use the proper terminology and giving those definitions while you're talking to your students. Hardware and software, the same thing, are talking about issues with the devices or reword what students describe. So hardware and software and troubleshooting kind of go hand in hand. When a student presents an issue like my Chromebook isn't working, have them talk about what exactly is the problem and using descriptive words and appropriate terminology, and then discuss the possible solutions with the students. So for example, when your student says, my screen is black, then you would reply with something like, your monitor is black. Do you think the battery died? Should we plug it in? So you're talking about not only the hardware, but some troubleshooting things to go along with it. Or if a student comes and says, my game isn't working, you can ask them, are you at the correct website? Maybe we should check to make sure you entered the URL correctly. Rather than just what our first instinct is to just fix it because it's easy for us. But by taking these little extra steps, it kind of teaches the kids along the way. Or things like my computer is locked up or it's frozen, teaching them how to restart it, because we all know that that's the first thing you do when there's something wrong with your computer. Some extension ideas. So if you're already doing those other things in class, here are some ideas that you can do outside of like the normal everyday things that are happening in class. So for example, with devices, allowing students to help with the decisions on which ones to use. For example, we're going to do a presentation. Which program should we use? And let them start to articulate to you which program they think is the most reasonable one to use. With hardware and software, this one can be fun because you can include hardware and software in vocabulary words when you're teaching the alphabet. So things like M is for mouse. And rather than having an animal mouse, have a computer mouse. And with troubleshooting, this one's one of my favorite, is to assign a tech expert job in your classes. And this can be done at any grade level from kindergarten to honestly high school. And your tech expert is somebody initially who you would handpick and train, and then they ultimately train the next ones. So a lot of classes are set up with tables or in groups. So you find one kid, because you all know that there's one in every class that is your tech expert already, and teach them how to help others. And then the next week or in 2 weeks, it's the same concept as having a line leader or a paper passer or the lunch counter of a tech expert. So here's an example of some of the things that you could do with a tech expert in your classroom. So some of the things that the kids can do as the tech expert is make sure the computers are in the correct slot. We're almost 1-to-1 at Gilbert Public Schools, so most of the classrooms have a cart or some other way of setting the computers up in the classroom. So making sure the computers are in the right spot, plugged in, and charging after every use. Making sure that the cart is plugged in or the power strips. That would be the first person that other kids in the class would ask for help before they come to you. So this kind of frees you up a little bit as the teacher, so you don't have all the kids coming to you for help. They can ask somebody, the tech expert in their class, and if there's past tech experts, then they have 4, 5, 6 other people to ask before they come to you. You may ask them to be in charge of the remote when when you need to use the projector. And if a computer has an issue, they take the computer first and then they bring them all to you at the end of the day or at the end of the lesson or something like that. And then you kind of teach them basic troubleshooting tips on what they would have to do if a student came to them for help. The other thing, as they get more comfortable in that role, is have a classroom help desk. We all are faced with having to go to the help desk at some point as adults. So to start training them those things initially, maybe you have a ticket system where the kid writes it out and lets you know what's happening so that you can then submit that ticket for repair. Any questions about computer systems? Looking in the chat. Everyone able to hear me okay, and it's a good pace for everybody? The next concept is networking and the internet. And the subdomains for networking and the internet are network, communication and organization, and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity standards explain what passwords are and why we use them, and use strong passwords to protect devices and information from unauthorized access. Network communication and organization with teacher guidance, students discuss how computer networks can be used to connect people to other people, places, information, and ideas. These are the ways that we're already doing it. So with cybersecurity, talking about online safety and appropriate websites, and only going to sites that teachers or parents have instructed. These are things that teachers are, again, already doing in their classes. As soon as they put a device in a student's hand, they're talking about, you can only go to this website. And rather than just telling them that they can only go to that website, let them know why and what to do if they come across a website that they're not necessarily familiar with. With security, having strong passwords and not sharing passwords. And I know that it's hard, but teaching kids at a very young age to log in by themselves. Again, I taught in an elementary school K-8 computers, and one of the hardest things I've ever taught in my career was how to teach a kindergartner how to log in to a computer. The school that I was at, their username and password for the younger grades were just their student number. But even a 7-digit number for a kindergartner in August is very difficult for a lot of them because a lot of them don't even know their numbers yet. So getting beyond that point, spending the time initially to teach them how to log in saved me a ton of time later, not having to log every student in myself. So teaching them about passwords and again, teaching them to log in by themselves. At our district, we use QR codes, but I still encourage my teachers as they feel their students are ready to start having them log in without those QR codes. And then with communication, discussions about connectivity, cell phones, the wireless internet, if you're connecting to a Bluetooth speaker, talking about what you're doing with your students so that they kind of have an understanding of what's going on too, rather than it's just magically happening. There's tons and tons of extension ideas that go along with, especially cybersecurity. Um, Gilbert Public Schools has adopted the digital citizenship curriculum from Common Sense Media, and I'm going to show you that in a second. There's also multiple videos from NetSafe regarding cybersecurity. I'm going to click on both of these. So NetSafe has all these different videos available, and then it breaks it down by grade level. So grades K to 3, what is the internet? What is personal information? Tell an adult. 4 to 6, and then it goes all the way up to the 12th. But they're short videos. Let's pull one up really quick. I'm not going to actually play it. But you can see they're short videos, 2 minutes, that you could easily show at the beginning of school, the beginning of your school day when your kids are getting in order and you're trying to do attendance. Throw a 2-minute video up on there on net safety and let them watch that while they settle into the day. Digital citizenship curriculum from Common Sense Media is probably hands down one of the best digital citizenship curriculum I've seen. They put a lot of work into this over the last year, and if you have been on it before, take a look at it again because they have really updated it. And what they have is they have 6 different categories for every grade level. Kindergarten and first grade only have 2 with an intro, but all other grades have 6. I'm gonna go to the second grade one because they have all 6. You'll need to log in. It doesn't cost anything. Nothing on any of these slides will cost anything. Everything that I show is free. It doesn't cost anything, but when you log in, then you get all the lesson plans. So I'm just going to click on the first one. This one I think goes for K1 and 2. They all have the same song. But they're really cute and the kids love them. So see how it says unlock free lesson. It's going to have me log in order to do that. And then what it does is it gives you an entire lesson plan with it's scripted. So this one's cute because it has a coloring book to go along with it so the kids can color it and bring it home, and then they tell their parents what they learned about digital citizenship in your classes. They all have a lesson slides that go with them. I'll click on that so you can see it. This is for every grade level from kindergarten through 12th grade, so 13 grades of lessons, 6 grades each, and they're all really, really thorough and very easy to use. So they have the whole slideshow here. So you can see it's got some vocabulary with it. It had the questions, shows a video for them, so it's interactive. It keeps the kids engaged because it's changing. And then at the end, it has the little coloring book that you can hand to them too. So it's just a great curriculum if you don't have anything in place currently. Even if you do, like it's 6 lessons, they're usually about 30 minutes to an hour. You can adjust them. It gives you the times here, 5 minutes for that, 5, 10, 5. So this one's 20. You can adjust them if you don't have that much time or if you want to spend more time, but it's really great curriculum. Again, we use it in K6 at Gilbert Public Schools, and teachers have given me nothing but really great feedback. The students are really engaged with it and having conversations that they wouldn't necessarily be having about digital citizenship. And honestly, when I run into kids in the hallways that I may have done one of these lessons with, they remember what we talked about. So it's not just another video that I threw up on a screen. They were actually engaged in it and really enjoyed the lessons. So I highly encourage you checking that out. For network security, again, teaching students to log in. It is so hard, but ultimately, in the long run, It'll save you a ton of time. And what I did with my students was I made a color keyboard. So they put their name and their username and password on here, and then colored it to match what their username and password was. So then they can find these letters and numbers easily on their own keyboards. I have a couple of different iterations of this that are attached to this slideshow, but there's some blank ones also that you could print out, put their username and password on. Even if when ours were just numbers, I had each one a different color. So G would be red, P would be blue, so they'd find the blue one. S would be yellow, say, and they'd find that, and they'd match the colors to the stuff on their keyboard. And it wasn't easy, but it was much easier than trying to teach them the difference between a 4 and a 7, or a 6 and an 8, because at that age, at kindergarten especially, they're struggling with that stuff. Communication, this one could be really fun because you can communicate with other classes within your school or the district or really anywhere in the world via something like Google Hangouts or Meet. We have WebEx at our district, so we could use WebEx at ours, but there's tons of video conferencing, free video conferencing that you could do with classes. I've seen one that was guess where this class is from. So that it's a mystery class, and they call in once a week from a different class everywhere and try to figure out where this mystery class is from. That was an older grade, but it could easily be done with younger grades too, especially if you're studying things like geography. Any questions, comments about networking? Data analysis, the subcategories for data analysis are collection, visualization and transformation, storage, and inference and models. And collection with teacher guidance, collect and transform data using digital devices, display data for communication in various visual formats. Storage, explain that a variety of data, music, videos, images, and text can be stored in and retrieved from a computing device, and identify patterns in data to make inferences or predictions. Data analysis is seriously one of my favorite domains. It's honestly one of the easiest to integrate into the curriculum, especially when you consider like collecting data. Their students are at the very youngest of students are counting, sorting, and graphing. There are countless ways in which data collection, visualization, and transformation are already being used in the classrooms. Excuse me. Students in kindergarten are learning to count, and then you learn to alphabetize. So you're sorting, you're creating graphs, whether they're picture graphs with how many people are wearing red shoes today. They're making graphs from those. With collecting data, a lot of everything with science is gathering and collecting data. And if you can put that into some sort of a graph, then you can put this into a spreadsheet and honestly have the kids make graphs too. I know, again, that seems like a lot, but I've done it with kinder and first and second grade before, and they really catch on quickly. With storage, creating and opening documents or organizing and searching their devices. Anytime students create, open, and reopen documents, they are learning that files created were saved. When you're creating files with students, teach them to name the file and not leave things untitled. Talk about creating folders as they get a little bit older and how to organize their drive so they can find their files later. And letting them gain that experience to create and open their own documents. And then inference and models, analyzing charts, creating charts, analyzing graphs. The inferences are discussed in language arts, predicting the end of a story, using context clues when reading, when you're teaching students to set goals and measure their progress towards goals, you're talking about inference and models. Some extension ideas with collection, visualization, and transformations, creating pictographs. I've seen those made in, we used to use KidPix, ABCYA. Paint has shape stamp or sticker tools. You can do things in Google Drawings. Um, Honestly, you can create charts in Google Sheets. And this is even doable with our younger kids, especially if you're using something like Google Classroom, because the file can be shared with the students and they just have to open it and fill in data. So I'm going to show you an example here in a second. But kids can do Google Sheets just like they can do anything else once they're on the computers. When you're talking about storage, properly saving documents, again, teaching them not to save things as untitled. They can't find their documents if they've saved it as untitled, or they can, but it takes quite a bit longer. And teaching them to access previously saved documents. And then inference and models. Mystery bags was kind of fun because they reach in a bag and try to figure out what it is, and then analyze reading logs, and I'll show you those too. Mystery bags was just a cute idea, but it can be related to computer science in that if something happens, or if it's like this, if it is red, it might be an apple. If it is flat, it might be a plate. So they make these mystery bags just with a brown paper bag and whatever you wanted to put in it, using their senses. So you can incorporate this into a science lesson. They give some ideas of what to put in their bags, but I would recommend even putting some computer parts in there. Put a mouse in there. Put keys from a keyboard. Your tech department, I'm sure, has extra keyboards sitting around, probably stacks of them, that you could put the keys in a bag and they could try and figure out what those things are. Um, a set of headphones or any other tech device. So those could be put into mystery bags. The other, when I was talking about creating charts in Google Sheets, this is a reading log that I created for one of my teachers. Load. And she shares this with her students. So it's a blank one. And when you go into Google Classroom, if you're familiar with Google Classroom, when you make an assignment using a Google Doc, you can create a blank or create a new assignment for every student. So as soon as they open it, it's already there. So we created one file and then shared it with all the students so that they could have their own copy. So what it looks like when they get it, I probably have stuff on all these. What they get when they look at it is this. So the teacher put in the dates, created a chart, even though there's no data in it. Once the students enter their reading minutes, so they read for 20 minutes that day, 10 minutes that day, 19, 20 minutes that day, they read for 5 minutes that day. So students start entering their data and it's automatically creating a chart. And then when the teacher does their weekly meetings with them, they're talking about their grades, maybe they're talking about their reading grade, they're talking about the goals that they had set. So a student set a goal to get better grades in language arts, and we look at their grades and they weren't doing that. They actually dropped perhaps. And you can look at their graph and find out that they might have dropped because they haven't been spending that much time reading. They were spending a lot of time and now they're spending a little. So maybe if we spend a little bit more time reading, those grades will actually go up. So they're able to correlate what they're doing in class with, or what they're doing for homework with the results that they're getting in their classes. I wanted to show you the pictographs too. even in something as simple as ABCYA, kids can take and make their whoops. Sorry. They can add stickers and start to graph things using the stickers that are on there. This one would have 2, and the next one had 1, and the next one had 4, but they can create the graphs on their own. And now they're displaying data through a computer. Any questions about the data analysis? Algorithms in programming consists of algorithms and variables, control and modularity, and program development. This is when teachers start to get a little nervous, but honestly, algorithms and programming are taking place all day in your classrooms. Algorithms consist of a set of steps to complete a task, and at the very basic level of this is the method used to get your students' attention. So everyone has a way to do that. I was actually subbing in a class today, and I said, what is your teacher's way of getting the students' attention? And it was eyes, ears, and body. That means they looked, they listened, and they faced their body or they kept their bodies calm. Some people are, when I say 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, you reply 1, 2, eyes on you, and then you're quiet. So that is a set of instructions that is followed in the exact same way. You have developed an algorithm for your class to produce a result. So let's see what other ways you're already doing this in your classes. These are the standards. So with algorithms and variables, model daily processes by following algorithms. Again, it's a step-by-step instructions to complete tasks. Model the way programs store and manipulate data by using numbers or other symbols to represent information. We do that with pictographs. With control and modularity, identify programs with sequences and simple loops to express ideas or address a problem, and solve a problem by breaking it down into smaller parts. With program development, with teacher assistants, identify plans that describe a program sequence of events, goals, and expected outcomes. Again, with teacher assistants, give credit when using the ideas and creations of others while developing programs. Teacher assistants debug. Debugging means to fix errors in an algorithm or program that includes sequences and simple loops, and using terminology to describe the steps taken and choices made during program development. And you can see why this is probably one of them that scares teachers the most, because it seems like a bunch of stuff that you may not even know how to do this in your classes, especially with K1-2. Like, how am I going to teach my kids to debug errors in an algorithm? But honestly, you are already doing it. How are we debugging? Test corrections. So with algorithms and variables, as you start to get into the older grades, they start using variables a little bit more with algebra, but we still are doing that with our younger students. Getting students' attention, like the example that I gave just a minute ago, 1, 2, 3 eyes on me, 1, 2 eyes on you, is if I do this, then you do that. It's an if-then command, which is highly common in computer science. Working on math problems, writing conventions. So when you have to put a capital letter and a period, a little bit of space in between everything, these are all things that follow a specific order. And if not done properly, then people can't read your writing. Same thing as it happens in computer science. So it's done a very specific way. And if you don't give all the directions, then it's not going to necessarily work. When you talk about recipes, recipes are a perfect example of an algorithm because it's a set of step-by-step instructions in order to complete your cake. You can't just throw the cake in the oven if you haven't made it yet. So that's a perfect example of an algorithm. Science experiments, those are another great example of algorithms. Anytime you're sorting shapes, sorting colors, putting things in alphabetical order, you have a set of rules that you're following in order to sort these items. It might be a rule that the student made up themselves. If you just put a whole bunch of things on their table and say, sort these, they decide what that's going to look like. Am I going to sort them all by color? Am I going to sort them by shape? And then have them talk about why they did the things that they did. Teachers are already doing this in classes. I've been by hundreds of classes, and that is happening in all of them. So they're already teaching their kids at a very young age about algorithms. With control and modularity, this talks about the order in which instructions are executed within a program. So when teaching students to read, we're breaking it down into smaller parts so they can decode the words, sound it out. And you've given them specific instructions on how these letters sound and what happens when you put them together. So decoding words is a great example of the order in which things happen and specifying specific controls on how to do things. Solving puzzles, when you tell kids to continue until or don't do anything until, like Simon Says, that's a control and modularity. Playing Simon Says is control. Timelines, because they have a specific order, are teaching computer concepts because it starts at a very specific date and goes through. And then when you talk about the water cycle and the life cycle and things like that, you're talking about loops. So a loop is something that's going to continue to happen, just like the water cycle, just like the life cycle. So these things are already happening in your classes. Throw some computer science language in when you're teaching them, and you're meeting the standard. With program development, a big part of that is debugging. And again, debugging is just fixing the problem and persevering until it's correct. So having students doing test corrections is probably my favorite example of debugging. When writing a computer program, you can't just stop because it was wrong. It won't work. So you have to go back and fix it. So teaching of some of the computer science concepts in accordance with teaching classes kind of gets them in the habit of things like realizing you can't just leave it because it's broken. We have to fix this. So text corrections, sequencing, and scientific method is an example of program development. Doesn't seem so scary now, right? Some extension ideas with programming and development are algorithms and variables to discuss routines and how they relate to computer science. Simply using the word algorithm to expose them to the vocabulary. I did it today with a third grade class. I was, a teacher had an emergency, so I went into her class and ended up having to get them ready to leave at the end of the day. I have no idea what her procedure is. So rather than ask them what the procedure is to leave at the end of the day, I said, "What's your algorithm for leaving at the end of the day?" They looked at me funny and I said, "Do you know what an algorithm is?" And of course they didn't, but they were all curious. And I said, "An algorithm is a procedure. What are the steps? Step 1, step 2, step 3." They all knew what that meant, and they were very excited to tell me how we leave for the day. But I just used the word algorithm to expose it to them. With control and modularity, code.org has a ton of unplugged activities. I'll show you some of those in a second. But one of my favorite is a happy loops unplugged activity. And have students giving commands to navigate a maze. So with the happy loops, let's see. That's not it, sorry. just going to play that part of it for you so you can kind of get an idea.
This lesson is called Happy Maps. Today we're going to help our furry little friend, the flurb, get to her fruit.
Make your flurb go to your fruit.
To do this, you'll need to figure out which way the flurb needs to go and direct her with arrows. In order for the flurb to get to the apple, what direction does the flurb have to go?
Mine, make it go up. And to get it there, you circle.
So you can see that it's a simple activity to get the flurb to the fruit. And I did this with a pre-K class, and we did it on their carpet squares. And instead of using a paper, we put an object on the carpet square and then had an arrow printed out. So you could point the arrow in the direction the student needed to go. And then until they got to the object. And then once they got the hang of it, then we took turns showing the students. A student was the programmer and another student got to be the computer. And the kids absolutely loved that activity. They thought it was so fun to be able to be the programmer and tell the other students how to get to where they needed to go. They were completely engaged in it. And again, that was one of the classes that I saw later, and they wanted to play it again. So it was a ton of fun. Big again. With program development, code.org again has, it's called Unspotted Bugs to do decoding. There's sequencing games online. If you're feeling brave, you can do some coding in Scratch, and you don't even have to feel that brave because it kind of walks you directly through everything. But these are some great activities. If you've not been to code.org, another one that I would highly recommend checking out. So that's Common Sense Media and code.org. I don't work for either one of them, but they have excellent curriculum that you can use with your kids right away. And it's broken down into grade levels. Any questions about programming or program development? The last one is impact of computing. And this one covers culture, social interactions, safety, law, and ethics. So this kind of falls under social studies a lot. Discuss how people lived and worked before and after implementation or adoption of new computing technology. Social interactions, work respectfully and responsibly with others online. Law and ethics, keep login information private and log off devices appropriately. You can see how some of this can fall right into a social studies class rather than having to wait for your computer time. Some ways that they're already doing it, compare how technology has evolved and how positively and negatively it's changed the way people live, work, and play. One of the lessons on Common Sense Media talks about balance and balancing your time on devices as opposed to the time that you spend playing or hanging out with your parents or eating dinner as a family and things like that. So how has technology affected the way we do things? Social interactions, the teachers are constantly talking about being respectful and responsible with others just in the classroom. And if you extend that to say with others online, then you're covering the computer science portion of it too. So we talk about bullying and being kind and all of these initiatives that we have to keep our kids nice, include the online discussion about that too. And then with safety, law, and ethics, keeping login information private and logging off devices appropriately. And why you would want to do that. Letting them know that when they're logging in, that they need to log in under their own, and let them know why, because it saves their files and they have access to their own files that way. Reminding them the importance of, again, keeping their passwords private so others can't access their information online. If you start teaching it to them at 5, 6, 7 years old, by the time they're 35, 36, 37 years old, this is already something that they're not concerned about anymore. Some extension ideas for impact of computing. are show examples of the evolution of technology. I can almost guarantee that your tech department has some old computers laying around somewhere. Bring them in and show the kids what they used to look like. Um, Phones, cameras, so much has changed, even just in my life, um, in my career, honestly, to be able to show them these kind of things. The kids love it. And then talking about the advantages and disadvantages of old versus new technology. With social interactions, again, there's some NetSmarts videos. These ones are all under 2 minutes that you can share with your students. Go to one really quick. NetSmarts has a lot of cool stuff for the kids. So this one's almost 2 minutes.
Be safer online and offline too. Remember these rules and you'll know what to do. Check first, take a print. Tell people no, tell them trust in themselves. Now you're ready to go.
So they're cute little rap songs or whatever. But again, this could be something that's played in the beginning of the day, maybe at the end of the day while some kids are packing their bags and it takes them a little bit longer. You can throw the video on to keep the other kids quiet and learning right from bell to bell. So there's a couple of different videos from NetSmarts regarding social interactions, and then some really good ones on safety law and ethics. And again, this talks about giving credit too. So even from a young age, we should be teaching our students to be crediting their sources when they're finding things online. They're not doing as much research as our older students are, but they should be learning to do it correctly and not steal other people's things. Any questions about the impact of computing? If you want to effectively meet all of the standards, all the computer science standards, then I would recommend assigning a class through code.org. They have a complete curriculum. They have class, you can, as a teacher, you can set up an account so you can set up classes and track the progress of your students. It has an entire curriculum for all grade levels, and I'm going to show you that in a second. And then it also has professional learning free for educators, multiple levels, and unplugged activities. And as a matter of fact, today I was with a first grade class. I was walking down the hall and 2 kids from a first grade class came up to me and said, "We finished course A, what do we do now?" And I said, "Well, you go on to course B, of course." So we went and set them up for course B. And right now, being Computer Science Week, a lot of classes are doing this at our district. So code.org has a complete course catalog. It kind of gives you a breakdown of what is recommended for each grade level. But even this it's got so much information that when I first started looking at it, it was a little bit overwhelming. So I kind of broke it down so that teachers could kind of get an idea of what they could be teaching on here. But they have little like 1-hour lessons and then tons of other resources and stuff for your classroom. What I did, I'm just going to go to my dashboard, is I set up classes for each grade level so that people could get an idea of what they look like from the student side, and then kind of have an idea of if this was appropriate for their kids or not. So I'm going to go to the first grade one. This is course A, and that's how they're labeled in code.org, course A, B, C, D. I labeled them exactly like they show up in code.org so that people were aware of which one to choose from. You'll see when you go, this is exactly what the kids would see. They get an unplugged activity. It gives a video that you can show to your students, and then it walks them through each step of the way. Go on to lesson 2. It says click the block. Click OK. That's it. So for a kindergartner, they're starting to learn how to click and drag, click and hold. This one has them drag and drop, drag the block to the target. And they're instantly successful. These are great things for students to be learning too, especially K1 and 2, because by 3rd grade, they're taking AZ Merit and it's all computerized. So if you're interested in doing those at code.org, in it, get out, I'm sorry. If you've not done anything with your students before, then I would recommend the pre-reader, or if you're, that's pretty much for kindergarten, but for the older grades, ABC, I would go right up the list. This is absolutely appropriate for a kindergartner also, once they've started to understand the computer, like later, maybe 2nd semester. Tons of great things from code.org. So again, I'll send you I'll send you the PowerPoints. The PowerPoints have links to everything on it also. Links to all those documents for the grade level curriculum. These are the resources that I used along the way in this presentation. I also have my website is on here, which has links to those documents as well. So if you know somebody in other grades that might be able to use these kind of things, then it's K through 5 that are there. Common Sense Media, there's a link to it from my website as well as the slideshow. Here's my contact information. I'm more than happy to help anyone with any of this stuff. I absolutely love computer science. I love working with people. If you wanted to try any of these things and you weren't exactly sure how to get them set up, it's a lot to take in a 1 hour webinar. So please feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy to help anybody. And I hope that you found some useful stuff in here that you'll be able to take back to your classes and use right away. Anyone have any questions that came up? I'm going to stop sharing because it kind of brings my chat window back a little bit better.